And we are live. How are you doing today, Matt?
Good. Good to be here, David.
Good. It was kind of a crazy day, at least for me. I'm sure it was for you as well. You guys were just filming out in Weberville, you said?
Yeah. A guy named Bruce Cook and his friend Bob Russell, super cool. They own these vintage cars. Wow. And we're filming at their place. And just, one of those days where the weather cooperates, everything falls into place. Got some younger actors that really stepped up, so got some good material.
How did you get? I want to talk about the project you're working on right now, but I want to wait for that. I kind of want to hear a little bit about how you got into creating film and like what inspired you to want to do it.
I think I had it had that same general appeal it does to a lot of people. So this is 1995. Never knew what I wanted to do my whole life. And then all of a sudden I always liked reading the different layers into movies, just like books, and had these ideas in my head. I think like everybody does. And then all of a sudden something kind of clicked. It's like, oh, there's these 3 moments of the movie that can happen, beginning, middle, and end. And so I'm like, I'm going to make a movie. So I read a few books to confirm how to write a script, wrote a script, figured out how to use the equipment and record, and made a movie. Now it was public access equipment, and it was on video. And in 1995, video did not look pretty. Film looked great and video looked crappy.
Right.
But made a movie, and where people talk about doing it, we did it.
So you didn't go to college for it or anything?
I went to college and I got a great education, but not specific to any job or not how to do this. No, I started my education with this after college.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I'm assuming that the first time you picked it up, it was a huge learning curve. Kind of learned on the fly.
Yeah, and that movie, I mean, it was...
What movie was it?
It's called Beaten Odds. I mean, I would consider it a student. At the time, I took it very seriously. But when you look back, it's like, that was a student film. That was how I learned everything,
Right.
Just go in, dive in head first.
That's the best way to learn anything, at least for me.
Yeah.
Like when I started doing this podcast, I didn't know how to do anything. Like if you go back, I don't know if you have, but if you go back and listen to the very first episode, or even like the first maybe like 20, 30, it's like, oof, that's rough.
Right.
But
learn. Trial by fire. It's the best way to do it.
It is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what is the process like when you're filming or when you're getting ready to film? Like, how do you come up with ideas? Do you find these stories yourself? Do you hunt them down and then kind of research them?
Right. In the case of this documentary, this is, we own a professional commercial film company. So that's different. Like an ad agency will generate a script. They'll collaborate with us throughout the process. Sometimes we'll be involved with the writing, but by and large, they have a script, they have a vision, and we're executing it visually. Then there's different elements that we fulfill. My business partner, John Berlinski, co-director of the documentary that I'm talking about, he is the experienced director. So we'll do some larger productions that you have to learn on a lot of levels and be thinking that way and really analyzing what we're looking to accomplish within, like how is the camera angle going to start and finish? Are we going to reveal more about the character with what's behind them or what's in their eyes, in addition to their reactions and all these other things? So it's something that I'm in the case, getting back to the documentary again, I'm so familiar with the story and I've been learning about it for 17 years that it calls for my involvement in the directing. So that's why we're co-directing this. But as far as how directing works and, when you get into the big picture and big productions, and we just are collaborating on every step. Like this shoot today, we're talking about it for hours, approaching it from all the angles. And, and then we know what to do when we're taking the first step.
Wow. Yeah, that's got to be crazy to put together, I would think.
It's been a process.
Yeah, because you have to hunt down actors and everything. It's not like do you guys have like a roster of actors?
No, but for something like this, it's not a movie. We're reenacting and we're not demanding as much of the actors, but but at the same time, they have to have the right look. They have to be able to function on camera and do some things and adjust. And so we're working with amateurs. And so that's another thing in and of itself. But again, it's not too demanding, where they're not delivering lines, which is a whole other level.
Right. Now, the Bath story, that's interesting because my friend told me about it. He's from Bath, and I didn't know anything about it. And one day I went out there, and where the school was, it's an interesting area. I mean, there's nothing there, just like a little memorial for it. How did you come about this, and what made you want to tell the story?
Yeah, it would, like you, I had lived in the Lansing area for quite a few years, never heard of it. And then in 1999, my coworker, who was older, very esteemed, she, when Columbine happened, she told me about this, fairly accurate, very short summary of this event. And I was shocked. I'd never heard of anything like it. I could tell by her tone and the way that she told me about it that she couldn't even believe that it happened, but it did. And that that was in a time where you didn't just jump on the internet and find everything about it. And so it wasn't until 2005 when we were talking about making a TV show. We bought our first HD camera. What subject should we use? And then my business partner, John Berlinski, brought up the Bath school disaster. And I was like, oh, yes, definitely. And so that being our subject, I went to Bath and started meeting. In fact, I technically lived in Bath because the student housing had sprawled so far north that there's a shared area between East Lansing and Bath. Anyway, drive up there and started introducing myself and got nowhere for months. Then finally people saw, okay, this guy's reading the books. He's really doing the research. He's really serious about it. It looks like he wants to do justice for this. And
people didn't want to talk about it?
Yeah. Oh, and some people, it's very complicated. It's not just want to, some people can't. And then especially when you had survivors still, now they were quite old in their 80s and 90s, but there's certainly a sensitivity to them. You're talking, just the idea of it would bring people to tears. I mean, and there's a carryover of a culture in which that's how you dealt with things. The press in the 20s was not necessarily sensitive to their feelings. Even the funerals were somewhat of a circus you got 400,000 people or however many cars in Bath that day of the funerals or the weekend of the funerals. Some of those people weren't behaving appropriately. And and you're trying to have a service and bury your child in a tough enough time, that's not welcome. So, it was still a raw wound after 78 years when we started.
This episode is brought to you by Red Bike Delivery. This delivery service operates only using battery-powered, eco-friendly transportation. Red Bike Delivery is there for all your delivery needs, whether it's dinner for the family, flowers for your partner, or new houseplants for your new collection. Red Bike Delivery will gladly deliver those and everything in between. So what are you waiting for? Check out Red Bike Delivery on Facebook or Instagram for more information. Red Bike Delivery, because there's only one Earth. Why was there so much hard feelings about it?
It's not hard feelings. It's just trauma and grief that didn't, that was still there after 80 years. And I mean, if let's say you were walking across the street with your child and somebody ran them over with a truck and you saw it happen and and it was just a gruesome, horrible event, times that by dozens.
Right.
And the community collectively was grieving still, and I mean, I would, for a lot of people, it's still a raw wound after however many years.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That it's crazy because, it's something that's not really known about.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it. It's not something you learn going to school in this area. Like you would think that if you at least went to school in this area, you would learn about it in history. But
yeah. And that's something we look into with the documentary, and the title is Forgotten.
Wow.
And so it's not just accounts of what happened. It's why was this forgotten? Because that's one of the first questions that people ask, like, or I can't believe I've never heard of this.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. There's multiple reasons for that. And that's
Probably.
something we get into with the doc.
That's very cool. I think that's very cool. I always kind of wondered why there wasn't much around it. You know, like I had told you a couple years ago, my wife and I went out there and we were just like looking like this was not known. Like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Why isn't there anything around it? There's no stories really. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's just not part of it's not like known in our culture.
Yeah. I think that with today and the way like all the different shootings that are happening, it'll be important to hear a story like this, don't you think?
Yeah, and that's what I think. It should be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that it is a modern phenomenon, all these shootings, but it's not strictly a modern phenomenon. It's back in the 1920s, this was considered an aberration. And when we started in 2005, it still was kind of thought of such. And in 2007, like, for example, when Virginia Tech happened, somebody might say, oh, you need to release the documentary now because, there's a renewed interest in it at this moment.
Right.
And it was true. It was a temporary interest when something like that would happen. And then, we actually did complete a 45-minute, which is an hour long with commercials for television broadcast in 2011, 2012. Nobody cared. There wasn't really any interest in it because reality TV had taken over. And then also, again, it was just these things would happen, but they didn't seem like, this wasn't as relevant to today's society, 10 years ago, 17 years ago as it is now.
Now,
sadly.
When you're studying this previous school massacre, do you see any like common behaviors or anything in like the person that committed it and what happens today in like these school shootings and whatnot?
So full disclosure, I don't dedicate a whole lot of time to more modern massacres. Like,
Right.
I dedicated
Right.
enough of my life to this one. And I had no idea what I was getting into.
I'm sure it's exhausting.
It's very depressing and
Yeah.
sad material, but, and this isn't something that generally, and that one interests me. And again, I had no idea what I was getting into. And then there's just no going back. Like, we're going to see this through and it will be remembered. But, it's a good question because, right, like now it's happened enough times where we're trying to look for commonalities. What kind of person is doing this? The perpetrator was, so it's just something was wrong with their head. And there's speculation regarding a closed head injury that he had a severe head injury at some time when he was working out west. And that seems to be the best explanation. People would say, oh, why did he do it? We could talk about taxes or his wife's family or the boardroom or this or that. Something was very wrong with his head. And I think from what little I know of there was a guy in a tower back in the 60s or 70s that in Texas or whatever, he had a closed head injury and he was apparently aware that something was wrong with his mind. And of course, we're finding out more about, concussions and, Hernandez and some other people. So, that stands to reason, but again, that's not my department.
Right. No, I was just curious to know if there's any, like you said, commonalities to then as opposed to now.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's good that there are people that are dedicated to really, psychologists and other people that are really trying to figure this out because it's sad and it keeps happening.
Now, the person that committed this massacre, he was an adult.
Oh yeah. He was in his 50s.
Wow.
Yeah. He was, financially doing, he was in a good place. His wife's family was very well off, and so his wife's family owned the farm. So he wasn't paying mortgage to a bank. The family held the mortgage.
Mm.
And so that was a he despised his wife's family, and as well as the community of Bath. So on this day, he lashed out against both of them in the most horrific way.
He blew up the school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And only some of his explosives went off, fortunately.
Wow. And a lot of people died.
Oh yeah.
How many people died?
45. There's an exact count depending on whether you count his wife as part of that and this and that. But that's the generally arrived at number.
Wow. That is insane. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's worse than any of the massacres that have happened in modern times. It's still the worst.
When you're diving into this, like, how deep do you go, and do you have to take breaks from it? Because I would assume that it would be, can you just look at it from like a point of history?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're editing, you're listening to the same people say these lines hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. And, it just hits you, grief just hits you in different ways at different times where, the loss of a loved one, all of a sudden something just strikes you
right.
2 months later or 2 years later, and you don't know why, but it just,
right.
And it's the same kind of thing. If you're working on something for thousands of hours, sometimes that's going to, have an impact in an unexpected way.
How long have you guys been working on this project?
17 years, over 17 years.
You did say that.
We
That's
started,
right.
February of 2005. And, but it's really, we couldn't have done anything without the community of Bath, without the Bath School Museum that is keeping this alive. And that, we really support each other and are always talking with each other. And we want to make sure that we're doing justice to this.
Yeah. Now, when do you guys plan on releasing the film?
We hope to have it complete this year for release next year.
Okay.
And that's a process in and of itself. So we complete the thing and then we show it to, let's say, Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV, whatever. And then they would, then they'll air it when they can. And my understanding is that that's months or quite a bit of time off before they'd actually air. And that's if it sells, who knows?
So that is your plan with the film?
Yeah, that's the general plan.
Awesome. That'd be cool. I mean, I think it needs to be on Netflix for sure.
Netflix, a lot of the documentaries on there are really well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you are filming this documentary, how do you film it? Do you have like a certain format? Because there's so many different formats for documentaries. Like I've seen some where they're almost like watching a normal film but they're trying to tell a story through these actors.
Yeah. We, and this has evolved as we went along. It helps people to visualize and to bring people to that time because it really was a different time. And we just can't really convey how different it was. I mean, it was closer to the Wild West than it is now. And, like you've got, kids, like if the barber would give you a driver's license and they would laugh and be like, oh, I've seen you change a tire. Here's your license. One of the kids, in fact, the stuff we were filming today, you have a 10th grader. He was going to go into the school a little bit later. He hears the explosion. He goes in. On the way, all these buildings are on fire. So there's just buildings on fire. You don't call the fire department. The 10-year-old gets on the roof with buckets of water and starts fighting a fire.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it was just you very independent, very strong, very tough people that took account for themselves and their neighbors and held each other up in this difficult time.
That's interesting. That'll be interesting to see because it's such a different time. I don't think kids would do that.
No, I think the parent would get arrested if they even tried. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's that's just one example of just when it comes to answer your question with filming, the people of Bath, the interviewees tell the story. So we were able to interview 7 survivors, and they are the bedrock of all of this. And then the descendants or people of Bath or related people that can also expand on that because they're able to tell it from a different perspective. And then also you have other people that have researched this for years, like Arnie Bernstein has written the definitive book. Amy Jones has just released a great book on this where she compares the media how that's been covered through the years and why it's been forgotten and these things. So then, people like this that have spent a lot of time researching the subject, as well as other historians and people like a pyrotechnician and these different people. So they are the foundation for that. And then editing together that and then what they say, that gives a story. And then when somebody is talking about, oh, this happened here, then it just is helpful for the audience to show it.
Yeah.
Because again, you're bringing them into that time. You're showing, okay, it helps people visualize the time and place.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, that light went out.
Oh yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah,
It doesn't
cool.
affect anything.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I like to watch documentaries when they have actors kind of helping tell the story a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost necessary in this case.
Yeah.
And it's a story about boardrooms and mortgages and schools and it's not a typical story. It's somewhat complicated, but we need to, because he was basically angry at everybody. We feel it important to establish that. And his wife, Nellie. We talk about, how this is important in today's world and relevant. Well, his wife was oppressed by him, and we don't know a whole lot about their home life, but what we do know is that's the portrait of an abused, oppressed wife. And in the 1920s, that was just typical. Like, that's how a woman lived, and he's the husband and she is the loyal wife. But it really is a tragic story. We don't know a whole lot about it, but it's really sad, the conditions in which she was living in. So it's important for people to see her for who she was and relate with her. These kids aren't just black and white photos. They are smiling, running kids, no different than yours or mine.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad to think of. We just want people to really relate with them. Yeah, it's a different time, but people are people.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really. It's easy to separate yourself from a time when you're looking at something in black and white, right? Like, because you're like, oh, that's. I mean, we're so used to seeing things in color.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and we can empathize with the children of a shooting that happened 2 weeks ago, and you see it on the news, and you just see your own kids going to school, and that could happen to us. And right, it's true though. Yeah, you think about, oh, this is a Wikipedia article,
right?
So we're really trying to bring it to life.
Now, does the guy who committed the massacre, does he have any family left? Any survivors?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have any kids, but
Okay.
there's people there's people around with that last name. Yeah, and they of course disassociated themselves. The family didn't do anything.
Right.
There's a pretty good chance that if the school had blown up as he intended, and then he had a rifle and he had new tires on his car and a full tank of gas, he probably would have driven down and started shooting his family member. I mean, it's tough to say what he really wanted to do, but he had bigger plans than this, and ultimately they failed because his he was a very meticulous, very, like, everything on point, and the thing he thought would be what he would be most remembered for ultimately was a failure. So I think that altered his course, and then he did the world's first suicide car bombing. As the rescuers, as the parents are trying to save the kids, he called over the superintendent who he hated, and the superintendent Hike, who was really being a hero that day, saving the kids, marshaling help and organizing that. Kehoe drove up, and he and Hike and some other kids, the shrapnel hit a lot of people, but it killed some other rescuers and one of the children who survived the initial blast.
Wow, that's so crazy. That is insane.
Yeah.
Now, when you're filming this film, how hard is it to find, like, the things, like the vehicles and the things from that time, that era?
People have been very helpful with that, and we'll find volunteers that want to contribute to the cause. And, you still have to bring together a crew and bring everybody together at a certain time and compensate people for, but it's a low budget thing, and it's that adds up regardless of how low the budget is.
Yeah.
It's we keep some of the productions have been very ambitious, and we've been very fortunate. I mean, even the weather needs to cooperate all the time, and it really has, and we've gotten just great people to come together and help us make this happen.
How do you get funding for something like this? Do you have like sponsors or people who donate, people who want to see this project through?
No, normally you'd raise the money,
Okay.
and then you set a schedule and you film, and it's done at some point, it done after maybe 3 years. But in our case, it started, kind of small, and then we got to this point, and then it's just sort of grown organically. Our company has continued to grow. So with our increased success, that gives us more resources. So we own all the equipment. So that's a big thing. But then we just would shoot this, and then we're like, okay, well, now let's shoot this, and now let's shoot that. And it's been an intense thing, but it's just like this thing that keeps growing. And as our company is able to take on the burden without jeopardizing our entire company, we continue to go move forward. Really, in the last 3 years is when we went, okay, let's really do this. And so it sat on the shelf basically from 2012, whatever, until 2018. We switched it from the editing things started to warm up again. And then in 2019, we really hit it hard. And then in 2020, we just, again, with these productions and shoots and things like that, it's just necessary to tell the story so that people can understand and relate and engage.
It'll put Bath on the map too.
Yeah. Well, and Bath is in a really transition, it seems, and I don't know that much about it, but it was a farming community then, and you had something like DeWitt, which has become, DeWitt and Bath were somewhat comparable, but Bath was light years ahead in having this school. And so all the kids from DeWitt would pay money so they could go to the Bath school. And now, from my understanding, it seems like DeWitt is this, suburb, this upscale suburb, and Bath is becoming, I don't know, it seems like it's becoming a suburb, but it's also its own town.
Yeah.
And so, it's just kind of interesting. It seems like it's a bit of a transition now.
Yeah, it is interesting. Now, what is the name of your company?
Ahptic. It's spelled Ahptic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that based here in Lansing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just straight north.
Oh, wow. Now, have you guys done big films before?
I'd say the most notable that people would recognize, Miley Cyrus. We did a video for her.
Oh, cool.
About 10, 12 years ago. Nelly Furtado, she was like the #1 star in the world in 2007 when we did her video. And you've seen lots of our commercials, we've done a lot of national stuff like for Audi and Toyota and, Meyer and brands like that too.
Okay. And is all that shot here in Michigan for the most part? Or do you guys go out of state?
Yeah, film out of state, film wherever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. And you're the director of this film, correct?
Co-director.
And
producer.
So what are your roles specifically? What does that entail of?
With this,
I feel like everything.
With this, it kind of, with knowing as much as I do, I'm generally the person who would talk with somebody or line something up. But that's a huge support now. I mean, now it's the whole company doing this, and the whole company, it's not, like I said, typically you'd finance this. Mm-hmm. Well, the company is, but it's not just throwing money around.
It's not millions of dollars.
Right. It's like the resources of the company are used as efficiently and precisely as possible to get one thing done. And then we get that thing done. And they're like, okay, what else can we do? Okay, can we get 20 kids here on this day? And what building resembles the Bath school? And, in trying to, make this equatable.
I would imagine that filming a movie would be so difficult. I would assume maybe a documentary might be kind of a little bit more simpler because you're telling a story and you're interviewing people.
Yeah.
And they're helping tell the story.
I think that, yeah, and it's debatable, I think, because it's writing is, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah.
And when you're writing a script, you're just creating it. And with a documentary, you're interviewing the people, but then you're writing while you're editing. So the first thing you do is take the interviews and edit them together and see how you can tell the story. So yeah, it's tricky, and it is a bit of a different animal.
Yeah, I've always been kind of interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Now, are you guys also working on other projects while you're doing this?
Oh yeah. This is this whole thing is a side project.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, we have to run a company. Like, so it's like, okay, if somebody calls and they have a commercial, and basically those commercials are financing this documentary. So
that's crazy.
If the company fails, then where are we?
Right.
That's not going to help the documentary.
So you guys work on several things at a time.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is all. Yeah, this is like, okay. Like some weeks I would have, maybe I could work on it for 20 hours out of the week, and some weeks I couldn't work on it at all, or I'd have to work on something on the weekends or whatever. I mean, back in the day, I would work. I just, like, if I wanted to edit Bath, I'd maybe pull an all-nighter or work on in the evenings and weekends and this and that, and now it's just it's just a juggling act, but paying clients have to take priority.
Right.
And then we can hire more people, and then we have another employee, and then that employee might have some spare time, and we're like, oh, well, you could work on visual effects for Bath, or you could edit Bath, or you could film this, this sequence. And there's all these things that come to, the program is 3 hours long. So there's lots of different things that could be worked on any given day.
It's got to be difficult to kind of pass things on, though, a little bit, right? Because I'm sure what you have in store and your idea of how you want things would be different than the way other people would see it.
That's true, but it's a collaborative process.
Right.
And what, it's like, it's great if someone else can edit, and then why not just see what's in their head? So let's say somebody edits together a 5-minute section. Maybe they're off 90% of the time. Well, they still did some cool edits here that somebody else wouldn't have thought of. I mean, dream world would be, you have 3 editors, each editing it, and then you pick the best of all of them, and then you put your own ideas into it. I mean, I don't know if that's a dream scenario, but
right.
But yeah, that's not. There's certainly merit to that.
How long have you worked for this company? Or
we started it.
You started.
John, who I mentioned, he helped me with that first movie I mentioned back in the 90s, and then we decided, he's like, let's shoot on film. So instead of doing a whole feature, what if we just shot a 3-minute short on film, 35mm film, which is great, but film is super expensive. And so, but we did it. And a lot like this, we pitched the idea to some people in Detroit. They brought out their equipment and all this stuff. And it was still way more money. The contingency for that 3-minute thing was more than the entire budget for the movie.
Whoa.
Yeah. But then we knew how to shoot on film. And then so we started working with other filmmakers from Detroit or whatever. No money. They would buy us a hard drive to store, back then 9 gigabyte hard drive was
gosh.
We're like, if you could buy us a 9 gigabyte hard drive, we could store your movie on it, and we'll edit your movie, or, be involved with this opening credits for your movie or whatever. So we did that for a few years, and then started winning over the trust of some local agencies, which is not easy to do.
No,
and then we got a job with Audi in 2001, and that was a huge breakthrough. And then we started, things started snowballing from there. But when you're snowballing from nothing, or when you have a snowflake, it takes a while to snowball.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I mean, that's kind of I'm sure that was a cool process to see, right?
Yeah, a lot of work. I mean, it was it's not just working constantly.
You're working for
broke.
Free. Yeah.
You're broke. I mean, so it's just like, okay, there's just all these things at once, and and then so we did that for years, and then in 2003 we bought our building because they kicked us out of the downtown loft, and for good reason, because they have they want people to live downtown. So they're changing our place to a loft. So we're like, I have to find a place. And then we bought a building. So 2 years of renovations, all of our money going into that. And then we're like, okay, we got this building. This is great. And then we moved into the building and, literally the building wasn't even done, but we moved in there and then we got this camera and we're like, oh, let's make this TV show. So then it's the documentary, which, I'm turning 50 this year, and this has been most of my adult life working on this documentary. So I can't imagine I'm excited to see whatever happens with this, what life will be like with this done.
With all the free time.
Yeah. Without this homework, it does feel like something that I really want to complete, and that will be excellent when it is done and it's out there.
Yeah. It's been like a life passion project, right?
When you're interviewing somebody who, Willis Cressman was one of the first people we interviewed. I think he was the very first person we interviewed. He survived multiple battles, like in World War II. Whoa. I mean, the guy in the foxhole next to him was killed. I mean, and he has all these stories, more than 9 lives, and he just wanted to see it before he died. And we did give him, we gave him a copy. In fact, the last time I saw him, but it's just really powerful. You want to come through. You want to follow through.
Yeah.
And on a lot of levels, but for the people of Bath is one of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it would be important for them more than anybody.
Yeah. And in fairness, like I said, people can't talk about it. People don't want to talk about it. There's still mixed feelings about this. I mean, it's a touchy subject, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And there's people that understandably, they don't want it sensationalized. They don't want it. They don't want the killer glamorized in any way, and it's you don't want to. You want to do it justice, and there's a lot of sensitivity, understandably so.
Now, how many people do you focus on in the film? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you focus on the killer, a little bit about him, his little bit of his backstory.
But it's more about it's more about Bath. It's more about
the community.
Yeah.
The effects on the community.
Yeah, and who they are, like who are these? Like, I mean, you're talking with, this is like Irene Dunham, another great example. Like I met her when she's 97 and she passed away a few weeks ago. She's 114. She's one of the top 10 oldest people in the world.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
So yeah, like you're watching this, and then I think I've been pleasantly surprised because I really wanted to make the ending very strong when we're like, saying like, who are these people? Like, and there has been that interest, and that's kind of what this journey has been like for me. And when I've encountered tragedy in my life, there's something to be said for saying, well, people have it worse. You have a wedding in the Middle East, and all of a sudden somebody blows up the wedding. I can't imagine what that's like. I can't imagine it was like for the people of Bath. I mean, there's times when I just kind of get an inkling of it and it's overwhelming. And so to draw on their perseverance and strength is a good thing. And that's the story we're telling, is that this is a horrible thing that happened, but people overcome. And that's why Bath is here today. And again, they are a source of strength and an example of that.
Yeah, people do overcome. It's the whole reason of this podcast.
Yeah,
it's about overcoming.
Yeah,
and rising above. But yeah, I think that's incredible, and it's incredible to be able to share that story, because, I mean, I'm sure that going through dealing with all the effects of it was pretty traumatic and very difficult, and I'm sure it's still difficult, but it's made that community who they are today. It's probably made them, if anything, stronger.
Yeah, I agree. And that they didn't have therapy the way that they do now. They didn't deal with grief the way that people do now, but they, in these different ways, supported each other and were there for each other, and they needed it. I mean, and that's another thing that plays into this. If you're a farmer, and it wasn't like nowadays where there's insurance and support networks. Like if you're a farmer, I mean, for example, this woman who Kehoe's farm was across the place. So when Kehoe, he simultaneously lit all of his buildings and house and barn and everything on fire. When that went on fire, all this stuff went across the street, and this 10th grader and these other people were fighting the fire. Their house caught on fire, and then, okay, so their house didn't catch on fire. Great. Now she's going to run a mile into town to find out if her kid died. He did. Okay, so she lost a child that morning. And then she just wanders back stunned to her farm, walks back to her farm, and then she just, it felt like, like the whole day had passed her, like it was the next day. And she's like, oh my gosh, the animals are going to starve. Like, she's like, you can't not feed your animals. You're going to die if you don't get your crops in the ground. It's, like that's it. It was like,
Wow.
Again, more like you had to be, self-sustaining, and
Right.
and normally the community would come and help, but
Everybody was going through it.
you got it.
Yeah.
So everybody was grieving. And if your kid wasn't killed, he was injured. And if not, then you're running around you're spreading yourself as thin as you can go to help your neighbors. It was very trying times, and they were very independent, and they accepted the help, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Lansing Police Department and Red Cross and all of those are appreciated to this day. But they wanted to rebuild their school and not have their kids go into Lansing. They wanted, like, as you say, that they just found this strength within themselves and rebuilt the school. And the everybody pitched in to make that happen and get things back on track.
Wow. That's so crazy. I never even thought about that, how they, had to be self-sustaining and that they just went right back to work.
Yeah. And that's something, again, it's just, we try to convey these times, and that's something that we touch on for a moment, but we can't, it's just a whole different world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're the cows, you have to milk them. Otherwise they're going to suffer. And, the chickens laying eggs, you can't just let them.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was a game. The game of survival for these people didn't stop for one moment.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about it like, I work at GM. So whenever like somebody dies, like a close relative, like if I had a kid die, which hopefully that doesn't ever happen, but I would get time off of work for bereavement.
Right.
They give you time.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure every workplace does that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
they're, take your time to mourn.
Yeah,
but
they weren't.
Not
they
then.
weren't granted that, and it's just the way it was back then. And I think because it was an anomaly, and then in part because of the reasons I mentioned before, then they kind of withdrew, and so then they and Lindbergh, like it was international news for like 2 days, and then Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, which was the biggest news story of the era. So then it kicked it off. But I think that in part happened because that's the times. It was a time of heroes, the 20s. Babe Ruth, how many home runs is he going to get in? And so it was just like, it didn't make sense. It didn't equate. And so that's part of the reason it was forgotten too. It's just like the world is like, whoa, that was weird. Okay, moving on. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I made national news for 2 days, and that was it.
And international. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
I mean, they were getting letters from Europe and from all over the world. But at some point, like you're saying, they're just, it's back to it. And I think that is therapy in and of itself. I think that that did find them some solace, but there is not a lot of people, I don't think, came to terms with it in the way that they would nowadays, where they would have the support offered to them, at least.
Right.
Maybe they would accept it, but they would have that offered to them. And there's a reason that, you have a day of bereavement, and then you have this closure and you move on. And I think that that's why things are the way that they are. And they just weren't able to get that in a way that most people can.
Do you, when you're researching this or talking to people, I mean, obviously they have a sense of like, they don't want to talk about it. So it's like a subject that's very hurtful, but can you sense like them not being able to fully, like them not, were you able to sense them not being able to fully grieve?
Well,
Like,
I think that the people, we spoke with a small sliver, so 7 people. And some of them weren't in the building, and they are very different than in a lot of ways. I mean, first of all, they're in their 80s, so they're looking back at it from 78, 80, or 82 years later. depending. Like one woman, she agreed to it 4 years after, and then you have, and some of them could talk about it easily. Some of them, like Irene, was like, "Oh, you should have talked to my sister. You couldn't stop her from talking about it. She'd just go up to you on the street and start talking about it." And then,
Wow.
and then you have other people. Like Irene did not want to talk about it. I was friends with her for a year and a half, and then I'm like, Irene, it really would. You really could contribute this in a big way. But during the interview, you can tell she doesn't want to talk about it. It pains her, and she doesn't want to repeat stuff. And and then an example of both of these things, you have Josephine Vale, who walked her little brother to school. He did not want her to sit with him that day, so she didn't, and he died. So she was waiting for him all day. She knew that he was in the school. She knew that he was buried and hadn't come out, and just this horrific day. And then her mom was not really accepting it to the level that she was. So she was actually looking under the sheets at these other kids, and they were just, they're mangled, and I can't imagine what they looked like and how horrific that would have been to see that. And then at the end, him and his little friend were the last ones that they brought out. And, in the interview with Arnie Bernstein, she's telling him in some amount of detail, and he's like stopping her. He's like, "You don't have to say this." And she says, "No, I do, because people need to realize how horrible this was." Now, I don't know if she would have said that if she turned it down an interview with us when we first asked her 4 years before. 4 years later, she accepted the interview. She lived to be over 100. I don't know if she would have said yes to us. Obviously she said no to us. Maybe she declined any interview for 85 years. And then she started talking, 80, whatever. So yeah, but then at that point she's like, there was kind of a common understanding that this was being forgotten, and there's definitely something to be said for silence and not talking about it. And there's also something to be said for honoring the victims and heroes of that day. It's something that we all grapple with. There's something to be said for both. And we try and be respectful to both.
That's very cool. I love what you're doing. I love that you're paying tribute to the community of Bath. I mean, because they deserve it. They deserve to be recognized for that, for their all the volunteer work and everything. I mean, still they're a volunteer city.
Yeah, and the people of that generation in that time, especially, a lot of people left. Understandably, they just left, or what, but there's some of the families that really stayed and rebuilt, and they're very proud of what their parents or grandparents have done. And so I think that there's an appreciation for that to be recognized. You know, I mean, how many people have heard of Emery Hike, a superintendent of Bath School? How many, if you asked 1,000 people, random people in America, how many have heard of that person? You get one, maybe.
Yeah.
He's a hero. He died saving children. And nobody's heard of the guy. And so maybe this can help change that. At least we're putting his name out there, and so he might be recognized. And his wife was there that day when he was killed. She was helping too. Wow. And so it's just, we want these people to be recognized.
That's really cool. Well, thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for talking with us.
Yeah.
About this.
No. It was an honor. It's crazy that something like this has gone untold for so long.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah. Now, when you said you plan on having it out in like a year or so? How can people find it? Do you guys have a website? Are you giving like updates on it? I know you guys put out like a clip on it. I've seen it on Facebook.
Yeah, bathschooldisaster.com is the website. And yeah, we have a Facebook page, Forgotten.
Okay.
America's Worst School Massacre. But yeah, bathschooldisaster.com is the site where there's information, there's links to resources like the Bath School Museum and some of these other authors that I mentioned that are also involved with the community. And yeah, there's you can see some clips of the movie on that site as well.
That's cool. And you guys, do you accept donations or anything like that to help with the film?
I would just encourage donations to the Bath School Museum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I mean, we've only been going for 49 minutes.
Oh,
you want to try to go for 10 more minutes?
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about.
You look
Your
tired.
Questions have been engaging. Yeah.
You look tired.
Oh,
I can tell you're blinking a lot. I know you've had a long day, so.
I've got a 4.5-year-old. That's the reason I'm tired.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old, so I understand.
Yeah, exactly.
You're 50 with
he's
a
got
4.5.
questions. Yeah, he's got and your 5-year-old has questions, which there's a lot of questions.
I know we're driving to Grand Rapids today, and the whole way there, where are we going? Where are we going? It's like, dude.
Yeah, he just started that this weekend. He's like, he wanted to know when, because we live in Chicago, and he wanted to know.
Wow.
He's like, he knew we were going to Lansing, and he is excited about it. And he's like, okay, so tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and then he wanted to know what's going to happen in the day before.
Yep.
Like, okay, we're going to do this, and then we'll go. And so he's constructing these, the future.
That's
in his
awesome.
mind. Yeah,
that's really cool. It's really cool to see like kids be that engaging. Like, and it's crazy to like look at and be like, wow, like that's a little version of me. Like, I don't know, just wild. It's wild.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. So you live in Chicago now? So
yeah. Back 12 years ago, I bought a foreclosure here in Lansing for $15,000.
Whoa.
So yeah. So I gutted it and
Remodeled.
rebuilt it, and then it's like a nice place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so so that's still here, and when work calls, like I'm jumping in the car and driving back, and so that's a place right near the office where I could jump in the car, get here, get whatever needs to be done. And, that's kind of what happened this weekend, where it's like, okay, we're shooting. And I stopped at the office 3 times already since we arrived last night, including on the way here to tie up the loose ends. And yeah.
Wow. So why do you live in Chicago? Is there a lot of film work there? Or?
I've lived there a few times before, and then I met my wife who has a job there.
Okay.
And yeah, we actually are expanding pretty quickly there too. Yeah. But Lansing is home, and Lansing's been very good to us.
Yeah.
And all, like our buildings here and our vehicles are here. And so, yeah, we have a presence in Detroit and Chicago, but Lansing is home.
But Chicago, there's like a lot of like film industry there, right? Just like New York and.
Not like New York, but yes, they're more significant. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a bigger city, bigger market, all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I just realized they opened a film lab. When we started, there were 3 motion picture film labs in Detroit, and Detroit rolled more film than Hollywood.
Whoa.
Until the 80s. A lot of people don't realize the scene that was going on in Detroit. And, the big 3, they were innovators with, modern, agency, marketing campaigns. So yeah, Detroit is huge. I heard yesterday for the first time that now they're opening a film lab, and I don't think it's motion picture film, but it's a start. It's good to see this kind of revival.
And that's in Detroit or Lansing?
That's it. That's in Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Yeah. So
okay.
To your point, there are resources there. But Lansing has been really good to us, and it's just nice being able to, like, with this, you want space, you want resourses without spending $20,000 a month in rent, and so when you in 27, well, it's been 25 years now that Ahptic has been around, COVID was no joke. That's not, when your business is traveling around talking with people and meeting people, like, that's got to step back for a little bit. So, here in Lansing, we ride it out, and these other places, we used to be so jealous of places in Detroit. They would spring up and have these huge, amazing offices and buy this multi-million-dollar equipment. They're all gone. They're all gone. It's like, it's just they come and go, and we're just, small venue that business as usual.
That's cool. I mean, there's something to be said for somebody who starts from nothing and then just, works on buying like these cheaper equipment and then working up to the nicer things.
Yeah. Now I don't know of any company that, there's definitely bigger post houses, which means editing, visual effects, motion graphics, that kind of thing. But I don't know of a company that has this much both on the production and post-production side in the state. There may be, but that's but yeah, it's cool to ride it out and live to fight another day and keep growing incrementally, like the way, I don't know, when I was growing up, that was how business, work hard and you build a business and it survives and it thrives, and that's what we've been doing here.
That's awesome. Now, can people suggest a story to you guys, like an individual?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody did that, I would say, okay, write a script.
How would you do that? How would you recommend somebody write a script if they've never written one?
Oh, I mean, do it the same. If you want to do anything in this industry, you have to do it yourself. So yeah, learn. I mean, Google how to write a script, or put the idea down on paper. Maybe just do a little 1-page summary.
Okay.
And then expand from there, and then like if you want, like a director, like a lot of those famous directors that we watch, they dropped out of film school because they at some point knew what they wanted to do and knew how to do it, and realized, as you said in the beginning of this interview, do it, trial by fire and dive in and learn it that way. And I'd say writing is along those same lines.
Now, being in the film industry, do you have any like heroes yourself, or like any like producers or movie directors that you look up to?
And they probably, I mean, depending on your taste, they're probably pretty similar to you. I mean, they're certainly in line with the critics. I mean, I could just go on, but I mean, like,
who's your favorite?
I never pick a favorite, but I mean, like, Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, P.T. Anderson, Tarantino. I mean, there's just so many. I mean, Tarantino, like, for me at that moment when I was watching some of his early films, really resonated, and knowing that he worked at a video store and started that way, it's just, there's a big appeal there. But yeah, I mean, the list goes on. I mean, and then you watch these foreign films, there's so many of them that we've never heard of, and a friend will recommend it. I'll be like, this is amazing, and it's just they just don't even, they're not unheard of here, but they're just incredible films all over the world.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, Matt. Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've gone 57 minutes, so.
All right.
So I'll include everything in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So all the links, website, all that jazz.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping us bring attention to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the first one to buy it.
Yeah.
or watch it on Netflix.
Yeah. We'll keep you. Yeah. If you sign on, then we can keep you posted, and you'll know when it is coming out.
Okay. Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.